When the emotionally distant start longing for the love they once rejected, the real story begins. Attachment theory explains how our early experiences with caregivers shape how we relate to others as adults. There are several attachment styles, but two that are especially relevant here are the avoidant and the anxious styles. Avoidant individuals typically value independence and self-reliance, often feeling uncomfortable with emotional closeness and intimacy. Anxious individuals, on the other hand, crave connection and reassurance, sometimes fearing abandonment and seeking constant validation from their partners. When these two styles come together, the result is often a dance of closeness and distance, what some call the anxious avoidant trap. So, why do avoidants sometimes miss the anxious ex they once rejected? To answer this, we need to look at what each style brings to the relationship, how their needs and fears play out, and what happens when the relationship ends. Avoidant individuals are characterized by a strong need for independence and a discomfort with emotional vulnerability. They often suppress their emotions and can appear distant or dismissive in relationships. This is usually a coping mechanism developed in childhood when their caregivers were emotionally unavailable or dismissive of their needs. As a result, avoidants learn to rely on themselves and to see emotional closeness as risky or even dangerous. In relationships, they may pull away when things get too close or when their partner expresses a need for more intimacy. Anxious individuals, by contrast, are highly attuned to their partner's emotional state and often fear abandonment. They may become clingy or seek constant reassurance, especially if they sense their partner pulling away. This can create a cycle. The more the anxious partner seeks closeness, the more the avoidant partner withdraws, which in turn makes the anxious partner even more desperate for connection. When the relationship ends, often because the avoidant partner feels overwhelmed or suffocated, the dynamic doesn't always stop there. In the aftermath, something interesting can happen. The avoidant partner may start to miss the anxious ex. But why? One reason is that avoidant individuals, despite their discomfort with intimacy, are not immune to the need for connection. Underneath their self-reliance is often a deep-seated fear of rejection or disappointment, which makes them wary of getting too close. But when a relationship ends, especially one where they were pursued and cared for, they may begin to realize what they've lost. The anxious partner's warmth, attention, and desire for closeness, which once felt overwhelming, can start to feel missed once it's gone. Another factor is the role of emotional triggers and attachment wounds. Avoidant individuals tend to feel overwhelmed by too much closeness or neediness, but they also have a fear of abandonment, even if it's less obvious than in anxious individuals. When the anxious partner is no longer present, the avoidant may experience a sense of loss or loneliness, especially if they don't have other close relationships to fill the void. This can lead to a kind of phantom limb sensation, where they miss the emotional presence of their ex, even if they once pushed them away. The anxious partner's intensity and emotional availability can also create a sense of security, even if it's not always comfortable for the avoidant. Anxious partners often go out of their way to reassure and support their partners, which can be reassuring in its own way. When that reassurance is gone, the avoidant may start to feel insecure or uncertain, especially if they struggle to regulate their own emotions or to seek support from others. There's also the element of contrast. During the relationship, the avoidant may have focused on the ways the anxious partner's behavior felt overwhelming or intrusive. But after the relationship ends, they may start to remember the positive aspects, the care, the attention, the sense of being wanted. This shift in perspective can lead to feelings of longing or regret, especially if the avoidant is not used to being pursued or cared for in other relationships. The process of missing an anxious ex can be complicated by the avoidant's tendency to suppress their emotions. They may not even realize they're missing their ex at first, or they may rationalize their feelings as something else, boredom, loneliness, or a desire for companionship. But over time, the absence of the anxious partner's emotional presence can become more noticeable, especially if the avoidant is not used to initiating closeness or seeking support. Another important factor is the role of attachment wounds and unresolved needs. Avoidant individuals often have a core belief that they can't depend on others, or that emotional connection is unsafe. But this belief doesn't erase their need for love and belonging. When a relationship ends, especially one where they were pursued and cared for, those unmet needs can come to the surface, even if the avoidant is not fully aware of them. The anxious partner, for their part, often leaves a strong emotional imprint. Their intensity, their willingness to express love and desire, and their focus on the relationship can create a sense of being deeply seen and valued. For the avoidant, who may not be used to this level of attention, the loss of it can be surprisingly painful. It's also worth noting that avoidant individuals may not miss their anxious ex in the same way that anxious individuals do. Anxious individuals often experience intense longing and may idealize their ex, focusing on the positive aspects of the relationship and minimizing the negative. Avoidant individuals, by contrast, may experience a more subtle sense of loss or regret, or they may only realize they miss their ex when they see them moving on, or when they themselves feel lonely or disconnected. The process of missing an anxious ex can be complicated by the avoidant's tendency to avoid emotional introspection. They may not spend a lot of time thinking about their feelings or reflecting on the relationship, which can make it harder for them to recognize or process their sense of loss. But when they do start to miss their ex, it can be a sign that they are beginning to confront their own attachment needs and to question their usual patterns of self-reliance and emotional distance. For avoidant individuals, missing an anxious ex can also be a catalyst for growth. It can prompt them to reflect on their own behavior and to consider whether their avoidance is really protecting them or just keeping them from the kind of deep connection they secretly desire. This can be a painful but ultimately positive process, as it opens the door to greater self-awareness and the possibility of forming healthier, more secure relationships in the future. Of course, not all avoidant individuals will miss their anxious ex. Some may feel relieved to be out of a relationship that felt suffocating or overwhelming. But for those who do experience a sense of loss or longing, it's important to recognize that this is a normal part of the attachment process and an opportunity for personal growth. So, what can you do if you're an avoidant who misses your anxious ex, or if you're an anxious individual wondering why your avoidant ex seems to be reaching out or acting differently? The first step is to recognize that attachment styles are not fixed. They can change over time with self-awareness and intentional effort. Both avoidant and anxious individuals can learn to move toward a more secure attachment style, where they feel comfortable with both intimacy and independence. If you're an avoidant who misses your anxious ex, it's worth taking some time to reflect on what you're really missing. Is it the attention and reassurance, the sense of being wanted, the emotional intensity? Or is it something deeper, a need for connection that you've been avoiding? By getting in touch with your own feelings and needs, you can start to make more conscious choices about your relationships and how you relate to others. If you're an anxious individual, it's important to remember that your ex's behavior is not a reflection of your worth. Avoidant individuals may miss you for a variety of reasons, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're ready or able to change their patterns. It's important to focus on your own growth and to seek relationships with people who are capable of meeting your needs for closeness and reassurance. Ultimately, the dance between avoidant and anxious attachment styles is a complex one, shaped by deep-seated fears and unmet needs. But it's also a dance that can lead to growth and healing if both partners are willing to reflect on their own patterns and to work toward greater self-awareness and emotional connection. In conclusion, avoidant individuals may miss their anxious ex for a variety of reasons, because they start to feel the absence of their ex's emotional presence, because they realize the value of being pursued and cared for, or because they are beginning to confront their own attachment needs. This process can be painful, but it can also be an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. By understanding the dynamics at play, both avoidant and anxious individuals can move toward healthier, more fulfilling relationships in the future. As we continue exploring this fascinating emotional landscape, it's important to remember that while the avoidant-anxious dynamic often causes pain, it also presents an opportunity for both individuals to recognize patterns and heal old wounds. These patterns are not rooted in malice or intentional harm, but in deep-seated survival strategies developed early in life. Understanding this can lead to more compassion for yourself and for those you've been in a relationship with. Let's take a closer look at how these dynamics evolve over time and what tends to happen after a breakup from both perspectives. When avoidants find themselves alone again, the silence that once felt like relief often morphs into discomfort. They may initially enjoy the space, free from emotional demands or relational expectations. But with time, the echoes of emotional connection begin to creep in. The anxious ex may have represented not just a partner, but also a tether to human intimacy, however messy it may have felt. What makes this even more complicated is the avoidant's tendency to romanticize the relationship in hindsight. When the anxiety and emotional neediness are no longer present in real time, the avoidant brain can start idealizing the connection. They may remember the ex's warmth and loyalty, their passion and dedication, without immediately recalling how that same energy once felt overwhelming. This emotional distance from the conflict allows avoidants to miss the relationship in a curated, filtered way, highlighting the good while minimizing the discomfort. Avoidants typically compartmentalize their emotions, choosing logic over vulnerability. But this suppression doesn't make the emotions disappear. It only delays their surfacing. Over time, and often during periods of loneliness or emotional challenge, repressed feelings can resurface unexpectedly. It may be triggered by a song, a familiar place, or even seeing the ex move on. Suddenly, that person they once held at arm's length becomes a focal point of introspection and longing. This is not necessarily an indicator that the avoidant wants to reconcile or has changed. It may simply be a reflection of unprocessed emotions finally bubbling to the surface. Unfortunately, without conscious self-reflection, many avoidants will misinterpret these feelings or push them down again, missing the opportunity for growth. Some avoidants may reach out to an ex not because they are ready to change or repair the relationship, but because they miss the emotional safety net. They may not be looking to rebuild intimacy, but to regain the comfort of knowing someone is still there. This can be incredibly confusing for the anxious ex, who is often hopeful that reconnection means reconciliation or commitment. This is why it's crucial for anxious individuals to be discerning. Not every message from an avoidant ex means they've changed. Change comes through introspection, therapy, and conscious behavior shifts, not just longing or regret. One of the most powerful shifts occurs when each person begins to understand their triggers and how their own behavior contributes to the cycle. The anxious partner often sees themselves as the one who tried the hardest, but that effort often comes in the form of emotional pursuit, which can overwhelm an avoidant and trigger their withdrawal. Similarly, the avoidant partner may think their distance was justified because of the anxious partner's intensity, without realizing how their coldness amplified the anxiety in the first place. Healing starts with self-awareness. For the anxious individual, it means slowing down the urge to seek reassurance and learning to self-soothe. For the avoidant, it means learning to sit with emotional discomfort and beginning to see vulnerability not as weakness, but as a pathway to real connection. So, can avoidant and anxious individuals ever make it work long-term? Yes, but only if both partners are aware of their tendencies and committed to healing. It requires communication, honest, non-reactive dialogue where both individuals can express their fears without judgment. Boundaries, clear emotional boundaries that respect both people's comfort levels without enabling unhealthy patterns. Self-regulation, learning to manage one's own emotions without relying on the other person to fix them. Therapy or coaching, especially beneficial for attachment work, which is deeply rooted in childhood experiences. If either person remains stuck in their attachment wounds, be it pursuing out of fear or avoiding out of protection, the relationship will likely remain unstable and painful. Ironically, many avoidant individuals begin their healing process not during the relationship, but after the breakup. The silence gives them space to reflect. The loss pushes them to confront emotions they've long ignored. It may be the first time they ask themselves, "Why did I push away someone who loved me so much?" This reflection can open the door to deeper understanding, but only if they're willing to lean in. Those who begin doing the inner work, whether it's through therapy, journaling, or even simply sitting with their discomfort often find that they've been avoiding not just partners, but themselves. For anxious individuals, the breakup can be a time of painful but necessary growth. Letting go of the chase allows space for self-worth to develop. When they stop viewing their value through the lens of someone else's attention, they start building a more secure foundation, one that attracts healthier relationships moving forward. In some cases, avoidance and anxious exes do find their way back to each other. But for this reunion to be successful, both must approach it with greater awareness than before. It can't be about recreating the past. It must be about building a new dynamic, one where vulnerability, patience, and mutual respect take the lead. This means the avoidant must be willing to lean into closeness, even when it feels uncomfortable, and the anxious partner must be willing to give space without interpreting it as rejection. It's a delicate balance, but when both individuals are truly invested in growth, transformation is possible. At its core, the dance between avoidant and anxious individuals is a reflection of unhealed parts of ourselves trying to find safety in another. The anxious person seeks security and closeness. The avoidant seeks safety and distance. Both are coping mechanisms. Both are rooted in past pain. Missing an ex, especially for the avoidant, isn't just about nostalgia. It's often about confronting a part of themselves they've kept hidden. It can be the first crack in the armor, a sign that they're beginning to feel again, to question their old narratives. But healing takes more than longing. It takes courage. Courage to feel. Courage to change. Courage to admit that maybe the walls we built to protect ourselves are now the very things keeping love out. Whether you're the avoidant, the anxious, or somewhere in between, remember this: your attachment style is not your destiny. With awareness, effort, and time, you can move toward a secure, fulfilling relationship, starting with the one you have with yourself. Thank you for spending this time diving deep into the avoidant-anxious dynamic. If this resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more thoughtful conversations on relationships, healing, and emotional growth. And as always, be kind to yourself. Healing is a journey, not a race. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more such content.